Hi, my name's Bill MacPhee, and I'm the CEO of Magpie Media Inc., publisher of SZ Magazine in the US and SZ in Canada. Today I want to share a little bit about myself, and share a little bit about a program called the Bright Future Program. But before I begin that, you may have seen my DVD called Living with Schizophrenia, that basically I go and talk about my experience of living with schizophrenia and how it affected my life. I've been dealing with this illness for since 1987, and I was very, very ill. I was hospitalized 6 different times. I lived in 3 different group homes, and I had a suicide attempt. In fact, I'd just like to share with you a letter from a doctor who basically was my physician, and this dated was July 5th, 1988. And part of the letter says, "As you can see from the relapse in nature of his illness, with bouts of psychosis occurring with little specific stress, that he is in very fragile mental health. With treatment, he has experienced disillusion of his flagrant psychotic symptoms, but he has never completely recovered his mental stamina, and he remains a man lacking in drive, energy, confidence, and the ability to concentrate and apply himself to tasks as he was able to do in the past. I think the long-term prognosis here must be deemed rather poor, and at this time I would consider him to be totally disabled from any type of work, and to remain so disabled for the foreseeable future." That was a letter that was done July 5th, 1988, and it was sent to the Income Security Programs at Canada Pension Plan in Health and Welfare Canada in Ottawa. So I must say that I have come a long way since then, and I am successful today, and I am married, have 3 children, and have a business and a high quality of life. And for those of you who have not seen my DVD, Living with Schizophrenia, I encourage you to do that. The reason I'm here today is to talk about a program that I'm doing for the Cottages of Mountain Creek in Atlanta, Georgia. And how that came about is that as a keynote speaker, Howard Wilson and Carol Reynolds from the Cottage on Mountain Creek, which is a rehabilitation center, what they did is that they had me down as a keynote speaker in Atlanta, Georgia last year. And after the presentation, it was a very good presentation, and I offered to Carol, I said, "Carol, you know, if you wanted to work together in the future and help me counsel some of your residents and try to help them with my experience and my goals, and you know, how I can help them, to just let me know." And out of that conversation came the Bright Future Program. And the Bright Future Program, and with my magazine, basically, the whole idea of the magazine is a helpful information and a tool to help people recover. In my definition of recovery, and there's many out there, but for me, my definition of recovery, and it not only goes for people who have a mental illness, but it goes for people who are in the general public, the everyday person. And the definition of recovery is when we can say to ourselves that we would not want to be anybody else but who we are today, then you can consider yourself recovered. Now, in saying that, I can tell you that last year in the US alone, there was 32,000 people that committed suicide. And you can bet that at any of that time, those people who took their own lives, at that time, they probably wished that they were anybody but who they were. So I developed the Bright Future Program, and I'm going to explain a little bit about what that is to you here on this DVD, to share with you some of my insights and about the program. So let's get started. So I base this program on 6 pillars of recovery. And the 6 pillars of recovery are basically, there's the spiritual aspect, there's the health aspect, there's the relationship aspect, there's the family aspect, and there's the financial aspect, and then there's the 6th pillar, the career or the occupation or volunteering aspect of recovery. And basically, I'll go through those one at a time just to give you an outline of what it is. But how the course is going to work is that I'm coming down to the Cottages in Atlanta, and I'm going to be doing a keynote speech every time I'm there on the specific topic. And then I'm doing one-on-one counseling with their social worker in the room as well to help me familiar myself with the individual, and to do one-on-one counseling and help them gain a better quality of life. Because I don't care what medication you're on, that if you can get your quality of life happening, and if you can get to a spot where you like yourself and that you have good self-esteem and confidence, your medication is going to work better and your quality of life is going to improve. So the first issue that my teaching starts about is the history of mental illness and stigma. And what I do is I give a keynote speech on the history of mental illness and stigma, and talk about how people do not have to feel so alone with this illness. One of the things that I've noticed in my years of speaking and my years of publishing SZ and SZ magazine is that people, when they're diagnosed, or family members come across with other family members who are going through a certain time, that they feel all alone and that they don't know where to turn or what to do. But as we know, if you watch my video Living with Schizophrenia, you'll realize that 1 out of every 100 people have an illness known as schizophrenia. There's 2.5 million people in the U.S. that have this illness known as schizophrenia. So basically what I want to do is I want to give people information of the history of mental illness, which has been around all through biblical days, and since history began, we've been there. And I want to talk about the stigma and how it affects each person's life and deal about that. Some of the stigma, just for example, what I've experienced when I've been publishing, is that I would get letters and thinking that people would get the magazine in the mail, and they didn't request an envelope for it, so it may come in a poly bag or something like that, and they would give me remarks and say, "Oh, I don't want my mailman to see this," or, "Geez, my landlord." I had one girl phone me up and tell me that the magazine, that her landlady saw it, the landlord saw it, and actually evicted her because she suffered from schizophrenia, even though her rent was paid and she was no trouble at all. And that's what we talk about, stigma and how to face that, and learning about your illness and saying it's not, you don't have to be ashamed to have this diagnosis, that it's a no-fault illness. It's not the fault of your family, it's not an individual fault of yourself, it's just who we are, and it's just one of those incidents. For example, we know that, say for example, diabetes may run in families, or we know that heart disease runs in families, or cancer runs in families, and also mental illness runs in families as well. So that's the first lesson, is the keynote speaking on the history of mental illness and stigma, and then we start on the one-on-one counseling once a month with the people. Now what we do as well is that we bring down a binder for people. We bring down, this is the Cottage of Mountain Creek, and what we do is we bring that binder, and we provide them with exercises such as reading certain books and doing certain exercises mentally, and workbooks. We have journals for people to make sure that they are always journaling and writing their thoughts and their progress and things like that down. The second part of the second time I go down, or the second part of the Bright Future program, is defining mental illnesses. Once we get okay with understanding what mental illness is and the stigma about it, we want to define mental illnesses. And the reason for that, for example, the reason for that is a lot of people say, oh, well, why should we call this schizophrenia or bipolar? Why don't we just say people are mentally ill, or they're in psychosis, or they had a nervous breakdown? Let's get rid of the labels, and let's get rid of these definitions. But what I say to that is, I say, no, that's a wrong thing, and I'll tell you why. I want to use an example of when when countries go to war. For example, I know that in the U.S. and in Canada, we have enemies, we have wars going on. We've been in Afghanistan, Iraq, and these things like that. And we look at those things as our enemy. And what do we want to know about our enemy? We want to know about their land troops, their air force, their nuclear power, their navy, their infantry, their artillery. All that stuff is about our enemy, and knowledge about our enemy. If we take mental illness and we talk about different mental illnesses and we don't name them, we really don't know who our enemy is. For example, if I know that I have schizophrenia, then at least I can put a name to it, and I can find all the information and all the characteristics and all what's happening in schizophrenia, so I have knowledge to how to help myself. So in this defining of mental illnesses, what we're going to do is we're going to look at what these illnesses are, their definitions, and how they are. For example, we're going to learn about what is schizophrenia. We're going to learn about what is bipolar. We're going to learn about what depression is. We're going to learn about obsessive compulsive disorder, and we're going to learn about anxiety disorders. And these are all part of the defining of mental illnesses segment into the Bright Future program. So I'm going to come down and give a keynote on the defining mental illnesses, go through this, and then when I'm there again, we're going to go one-on-one in counseling with the partnerships with myself, the individual, and their social worker. Now, we get into the 6 pillars of rehabilitation, or recovery as I call it. And you all remember my definition of recovery, when we wouldn't want to be anybody else but who we are today. The first pillar, which is very important, is spirituality. And I just want to share with that to you what that means, and then I'll share what it means with you. But it's a key focus, and these pillars are in certain order because to get the most benefit from the program. Now, spirituality, when we think about it, basically all that really means is that we believe in a higher power, and we believe that that higher power is God, and therefore we want to know that God is basically for us and not against us, and realize that He has a plan for us. Now, I want to just share a little bit about my spirituality and what kind of happened with me. A few things is that I grew up in the Catholic Church, and I was an altar boy, and I served at many funerals and many weddings. In fact, I served at my sister's wedding. But you know what? Back then, I was more of an atheist than anything. I didn't believe in God. I saw no power in the church. It was just meaningless to me, and I was more of an atheist than anything. However, at one time it came across where I was looking for forgiveness, and I was diving through theology, and I was studying, and I was seeking and searching for meaning, and why did I get sick, and all this kind of things. And what happened is that I read a book called Creation versus Evolution. And once I read that book, it meant so much to me, because through creation, I really recognized that yes, this all what we have today on earth can't have just evolved and come from some big bang and a mixture of soup and the chemicals coming together. I mean, we probably all heard about the scenario saying where evolution is like a tornado running through a junkyard and twisting and throwing parts all together, and at the end you have a Rolls Royce there or something like that. It just doesn't happen that way. So once I read that, I knew there was a God. I knew it with all my heart, my soul, my mind, and I was so happy. And I thought right away, you know what? If there is a God, which I know, then this God must be a good God and want the best for us, and not necessarily, has a plan for our life. So that's where I'm coming from, and I want to instill in people. I want to give them the freedom to search, seek, find, read, and these will be part of the lessons. I happen to be a Christian. However, I'm not going to push my faith on anybody. We're going to let individuals seek and come to a conclusion, hopefully in a higher power, and have the attitude that God is for me and not against me. And saying, I just want to share a couple things on this before I go to the next pillar. I can remember when I was 19 years old, I lived in Singapore. I went to school and I was a commercial diver. I had my underwater skills certificate, and at 19 I went to Singapore, and I was looking for jobs. I was looking for work. And I can remember thinking that I would get a job right away. Well, it just so happened that I didn't get a job right away. It took me a couple months. But when I first got to Singapore, I was staying in 5-star hotels thinking I'd get a job the next day. And literally, that did not work. I ended up going down, scaled down to places where I was staying, until really one day I found myself in a youth hostel in the YMCA, where I paid $1 a night to stay there, but I got to stay free if I killed a rat. And that's the kind of place that was. But I was down to my last $200, and I was walking down Orchard Road, and it was 2 days before Christmas, and I wanted to wire my mom home for some flowers for Christmas. And I came in the cross of the